A lot of content on the internet on how to fix lateral pelvic tilt or asymmetrical hips is focused on corrective exercises, but almost no one is talking about how you can actually use weight training exercises to fix the problem and strengthen a better pelvis position long term. I'm gonna break down the ideal exercises for creating more symmetry of the hips, regardless of whether your pelvis is tilted up or down on one side, whether it's rotated forward or back. I'm going to give you the perfect exercises to address these problems. Now, the first thing we need to do is actually identify what the position of your pelvis actually is, so that way we can pick the best interventions and the best exercises. Now, many people think they know the position of their pelvis because of the subjective nature of how they feel when they sit or stand or walk, but it's very important to have objective testing that identifies the position of our pelvis and gives us a good idea of the gaps we need to fill in. So if you want the best resource to identify what your pelvis is actually doing, check out this video. It is a great guide with tons of objective assessments for identifying the position of your pelvis and how it's turned and oriented. Now, regardless of who we're talking about, everyone's pelvis is asymmetrical to a certain extent. The question is it problematic? So just because you have an asymmetrical pelvis doesn't mean you need to fix it, but it can definitely be tied into certain problems and pain experiences within the body, especially at the low back, the hips themselves, the knees, and the feet. You never see one side of the pelvis that is just forward and not rotated up or down. It's degrees of percentages of millimeters potentially. Now, the degree of which is up for debate. Some people have a very asymmetrical pelvis. Other people have just a smidge of a higher hip on one side. And remember, not everyone needs to fix this, nor is this the root of their problems. But if you do want to address this, here's what you gotta know. First, when the pelvis is turned towards one side, I will generally have, in most cases, a sacrum bone right here that faces the right side. In order to get a sacrum that faces the right side, I have to have a more forward pelvis on the left side. Generally, the more forward pelvis is also the lower side of the pelvis. So I hope you can see how that would work right there. So if I have a pelvis that's turned to the right side, generally what you're going to see is a pelvis bone on the left that is forwardly tipped and externally rotated. External rotation of the pelvis, and I'm exaggerating how much movement is at the pelvis, by the way, so you can visually understand and see what I'm saying, is this. The pelvis opening up like a flower. Now, when I have that on just one side, that has a tendency to turn the sacrum and turn the pelvis to the other side. Now, on the right side, what you're going to see is a more internally rotated pelvis. Internal rotation of the pelvis is this action, again, very much exaggerated. Now, if I have a more externally rotated pelvis on the left, my right side will be relatively internally rotated. When I internally rotate the right side, you can see how that assists in the sacrum facing the right side. The net effect of this is that the pelvis is forward on the left, tipped back on the right, and you also tend to see a higher hip on the right side. Now, the position of these bones, the femur bones, does matter. And this is going to be important for exercise selection. If I have a pelvis that's lower on the left and turned to the right, that's going to turn this bone in. Do you see how that's going to slide it back in the hip socket right there? On the left side, it's going to be more externally rotated. So if I turn away from that side, do you see how that promotes more external rotation, forward sliding of the hip within the socket there? So in totality, we have a more internally rotated right pelvis bone right here, a more internally rotated right femur, a more externally rotated left pelvis bone, and a more externally rotated left femur. This is what you see typically. You can have alterations of this, but this is the most common pattern. Now, in order to address this, we have to think of a couple of things. Now, it's very important to understand an asymmetrical body requires an asymmetrical approach. Therefore, both sides of the pelvis won't be doing the same types of, let's say, single leg exercises. That's not to say, and I want to highlight this, that you can't do bilateral exercises, meaning squats and deadlifts in a position where you have both feet parallel in line with each other straight ahead. That's your traditional barbell back squat or your conventional deadlift, for example. However, as accessory exercises, I think that there's a lot of value to understanding how we can pick specific asymmetrical approaches. Now, there's a very important thing to consider here, and that is load placement. Now, we're going to use the split squat as the example because I think it's a really good illustration of how load on one side affects naturally the position of the pelvis. Now, in a split squat, it's important to appreciate first that when we have one leg forward and one leg back, we're going to be in that split stance position. The side of the pelvis that is more forward is obviously the leg that is more forward. That side is starting in more external rotation. The side of the leg that is back is going to be more internally rotated. The pelvis is going to be facing the back leg in this instance. Now, the body's concerned about balance and maintaining equilibrium. So if we are going to have a weight pulling us off to one side, we're going to naturally turn away from that side. And that's a very important thing to consider here. Let me show you what I mean. If I have a weight in, let's say, my right hand, I'm being pulled off to the right side. So to even myself out, I need to reflexively side bend to the left side to some relative degree. I'm also going to want to turn my hips away from that side. That makes it easier for me to keep balance. Therefore, if I have one leg forward, one leg back in a split squat position, and I have a weight in my right hand, I'm naturally going to turn my pelvis away from the right side and towards my left hip. So this is providing me more internal rotation on this left hip as a natural byproduct of being in this position with just one weight in my right hand. Now, as I descend into the split squat, my pelvis will face the left side more so than it would have if I had a weight in both hands that was even, or if I had no weight at all and I just descended into a split squat. Now my pelvis would be more biased towards facing the right side as it normally would in that split stance position. Now let's change things. Let's say I'm holding a weight in my left hand. Now, in order for me not to fall off to the left, I have to turn my pelvis away from this side. Now I am creating even more external rotation of my hip on this left side. So as I go down into that split squat, my pelvis will be facing overall more the right side than it was before. This will naturally happen without you having to think about it too much, which is why I love it so much. Let's say I was doing now a single leg deadlift like this. The same thing would apply. So if I was, for example, wanting to turn my pelvis more left and promote more left hip internal rotation, I would hold a weight in that right hand in front of the right thigh, not think about too much else, and then just go into that hinge, maintaining a good position. Coming up out of that, boom, now I'm more internally rotated my left hip as I go down. If I hold the weight in my left hand, now I will turn away from that side. And I will now be promoting more of a turn away from the left side as I go down and up. Hey guys, post-editing Connor here. I just needed to slide in and let you know about something really important quickly. If you like this type of approach, check out my brand new Symmetric Strength Training Program. It is a weight training program that is individualized to your own limitations and asymmetries. There are a wide-ranging variety of programs for anyone to be able to do, from a total beginner to someone that's been training for several years. So if you're interested, check it out down below in the description. Let's say I had a pelvis that was, again, using that example, lower on the left and higher on the right, but turned right. Well, what I would want to do is facilitate left hip up, turned left pelvis. That's what we're going for here. So we would want more left hip internal rotation, right hip external rotation. So when I'm training this left foot forward split squat, what I would want to do is use some sort of elevation. This is going to naturally have me hike up my hip a little bit more on the left side without me needing to think about it. Now, I like to start in the bottom of a split squat to make sure that I'm nice and comfortable there, holding the weight in front of my right thigh as I go up. What might be helpful is to then turn this around. And I would probably want to then do a left foot, rear foot elevated split squat. Now on the right side, remember, I want to turn away from the right side. I want to promote more external rotation on the right side, left pelvis turn. So what I could do is a rear foot elevated split squat with the right foot forward. Now I would use an ipsilateral load, meaning same side load of the leg that is forward. Make sure, again, starting in the bottom of that split squat so I can ensure that my back knee is underneath my back hip. You want that regardless of whatever split squat that you're in. Now I have more of a forward shin angle. This is more of a pushing out of one side shin angle. And as I go up, I can focus on keeping my whole foot flat, and then everything else will just take care of itself, and I will feel like my pelvis is naturally more left. And then I can just focus on going through that split squat, maintaining my weight over that right foot. Also, because I am turning away from this side and my shin is more forward, I'm gonna be feeling more right quad work here. Again, a muscle that helps push me out of the right side, and more right outside hip, which is, again, muscles that help us push out of one side. And when I'm doing this variation right here, where I have just probably one to start, as I go down, I'm going to feel more of my inner thigh, and that is my adductor muscle, which helps me pull into that left side.